From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Busy old day today. Welcome to Thursday's programme. How are you? Hope you had a good day. It's been a mixed old day, changeable day. All sorts of weather we've had here in the great city of Manchester. It's Thursday, September 6, 2018. My name is Richie Allen. Would you believe it? Welcome to your Richie Allen Show.
Richie Allen.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Former BBC journalist and the presenter and producer of the politics show on BCfm, Tony Gosling, top man to say the least, will join the programme a little later on, in about 20 minutes or thereabouts. And we'll be talking about the Hans Christian Andersen-esque fairy tale that is the UK government's claims about this Russian assassin, these two Russian assassins, and the Novichok plot. It couldn't be any more bizarre. Tony will dig down into it in this hour. And in the second hour, I welcome back to the programme Tina Louise Rothery, political campaigner, activist, anti-fracking activist, honorary life member of the Nanas, and a thorn in the side of companies like Quadrilla. We're going to talk about fracking with Tina in the second hour. Can't wait to speak with her, actually. It's been too long. As usual, if you'd like to say something about any of those issues, you can tweet me. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter, and I will read out your comments as they come in, as I see them. That's at Richie Allen Show again. That's the Twitter handle. I don't give out the email address so much these days because it's unreliable. It's better to tweet. And if you're worried about Twitter, just make up some crazy anonymous account and tweet your opinions to me and I'll read them out. Alright, alrighty. There you go. Right, it is Thursday. It's been a quick old week since I came back from my unintended extended break. It's been a fast old week. Enjoying the time slot. Good evening to you anyway. Now, let's jump straight in. Before we get all serious and talk Novichok. You see, I'll do things arse ways. That's a very, very old Irish colloquialism. Arse ways. To do something arse ways is to do it the wrong way around. I should kick off with Novichok, but I won't. We'll start off with a light-hearted story. At least I thought it was light-hearted, or at least I think it's light-hearted. It could be evidence that I'm mean-spirited, though, and I don't think I am mean-spirited. My bark is far worse than my bite. But I found this funny. You might find it funny. A transgender woman. This is an oxymoron, by the way. There should be no such thing as a transgender woman. A woman living as a man is how we should say this. A transgender woman, anyway, writes to BBC, said she felt humiliated after a bank froze her account because she sounded like a man. Right. I couldn't help but laugh at this. Although the transgender woman, Sophia Race, is probably, maybe if I was in her shoes, maybe I wouldn't find it so funny. But she was using Santander's telephone banking service when a member of staff decided to decline her access to her money. Presumably the member of staff was looking at the name Sophia and was speaking to somebody who spoke a bit like this. Maybe. Right? So they froze the account. So Sophia said a customer service advisor told her that this is all about her voice. Santander says, well, we've got a duty to protect the security of accounts. But they did apologise for any offence caused. Why did they apologise? Sophia rings up and wants... and anybody who's got online banking knows they ask you a series of security questions to determine that, first of all, it's really you, most importantly, and I suppose secondary, to try and determine if you're phoning them under duress, maybe. So anyway, Sophie is not too happy. She gave all the correct security information, but the debit card and the accounts were frozen until she popped into the local branch to prove who she was. I felt embarrassed, I felt humiliated, because yet again I have to explain myself, she said. I want for the bank to have something in place where people like myself get protected and don't have to go through this every time. Now the bank said it's quite simple. We'll put a note on the account, so next time she phones, the telephone operator, the customer services person will just get a little note pop up on the screen. All's well, everybody wins. But she's not happy. She's a victim now, you see. She's a victim. And nobody should have to live like this, said Sophia. Sophia, get over yourself. Live like a woman if you want, but as long as you sound like this, mate. Well, when you phone people up, they might doubt that your name is really Sophia. There you go. There you are. Well, dear listener, let's move on to more serious stories. Nobody's got any sense of humility these days, do they? Or any sense of fun, or any sense of well. Nobody's got any sense of perspective, you know. The world must revolve around people like Sophia. Rather than Sophia say, well, yeah, maybe I can understand why when I ring up and say, yeah, my name is Sophia. Maybe I can just understand, maybe they might have a problem with that. Anyway, let's go to more serious matters. Just before I came on air, dear listener, it was revealed, it was announced that the United States, France, Germany and Canada have agreed with the United Kingdom that the Russian government almost certainly approved the Novichok poisoning in Salisbury.
Surprise, surprise.
Hey,
The unexpected
hits you between the eyes. Oh yeah.
the unpredictable.
Well, that's the surprise, you see. That's the voice that Sophia should use when she rings up Santander. That's the surprise, you see. Right, so it's no surprise that all of these clowns, the US, France and Germany, have agreed with the UK that the Russians ordered the Novichok poisoning. Yep. So what they want is they want Russia to provide full disclosure of its Novichok program. Of course Russia will do that tomorrow. Even if there was a Novichok program, the Russians will go, okay, here's all the documentation. So these leaders meet at, or are meeting at the UN to discuss the attack on Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia and its fallout. Russia has continued, of course, to deny any involvement. Now, earlier today, Ben Wallace, a security minister in the UK government, well, he said that Vladimir Putin must take responsibility for the Salisbury Novichok attack. Wallace was speaking to the BBC and Sky News, and he said ultimately, of course, Russia's president was behind the poisoning. Here is Ben Wallace speaking with Sky News. He is high on hyperbole, but very light on evidence.
The GRU is a military intelligence unit belonging to the Russian Ministry of Defense. These people were serving GRU officers. They weren't retired or anything else. They were serving GRU officers. They were on a mission. It was a completely cack-handed mission, I'm afraid to say, and if it wasn't so tragic, it would be rather amusing. But nevertheless, they were on a mission. The GRU answers to the Ministry of Defense, who answers to the President of Russia. So I think the key is, of course, the Russian senior levels of government were involved or were linked to this decision, and I will let other people speculate about whether that means actually Putin or not. But the government as a whole is obviously led by the President of Russia. And directly or indirectly, he bears very strong responsibility.
What a wet fart, Ben Wallace is. I'll let other people speculate as to whether that means Putin was behind it, but Putin was behind it, says Ben Wallace. The Kremlin denies involvement and said it was unacceptable to make accusations against the Russian government without providing any evidence. The UK, of course, has named two men. We know all about this by now. Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Bashirov. That's who they've named, the UK. They say they entered the country on Russian passports using those names and carried out this attack. The story is so bizarre. I'm not going to get into the details of how bizarre the story is until Tony Gosling joins me in a few minutes' time. Theresa May said it wasn't a rogue operation. It was certainly or almost certainly approved at a senior level of the Russian state. Ben Wallace also said today that the UK would be in a better position to sanction Russia if it was outside the EU.
As a member of the European Union, we can't put sanctions on unilaterally. We have to do it collectively. Come March next year, we will then be empowered to have our own unilateral sanctions in the same way the United States. That's why we've taken through Parliament the Sanctions Act only recently, so that we'll be ready to go. Now, what those sanctions will look like, who exactly will target them, but that will be a matter for government as a whole to decide when those powers are able to be used. But we will soon have that power to do so if we wish.
Yeah, well, look, we'll leave that there. We're going to talk more about it with Tony Gosling shortly. Now, moving on rather swiftly. But just before we move on, there are more holes in this fairy tale about these two assassins than you'd find in a Swiss cheese. And Tony Gosling will break it all down in a few minutes' time. More crimes against humanity being committed in Israel on a daily basis. Nobody cares. The Israeli High Court of Justice has given the green light to the eviction of a West Bank Bedouin village despite international condemnation. Good old racist Israel. They've basically given the go-ahead to destroy a West Bank Bedouin village. The court rejected an appeal from the residents of Khan al-Ahmar, saying the village was built without a permit. Gotta love the Israelis. Of course there was no permit. The Israeli authorities don't grant permits for Palestinians, do they? What else can they do, these people? Anyway, this village has got more than 180 people in it. More than half of them are children, and they will be homeless. The United Nations and Amnesty has condemned it, but the psychopaths, of course, in Tel Aviv couldn't care less. Speaking of the UN, it has repeatedly warned Israel against forced evictions, including in this village, as it may lead to the forcible transfer of the population of an occupied territory. That is considered illegal under international humanitarian law. Amnesty International have said these forced transfers are in fact war crimes under a statute of the International Criminal Court. Good old Israel, eh? RT reporting on that, Press TV, one or two bureaus in Israel, but the UK, French, Irish, Spanish, and of course the rest of the European media, well, they're not covering this because they just don't care. And this is some laugh, this story today, and I think it perfectly illustrates even points that I've been making on this programme for a long time. You heard Catherine Drew at the top of the hour on the news. The US Vice President Mike Pence, he's one of many senior Trump administration officials to basically say, I didn't do it, Governor. I am not the anonymous writer who wrote the editorial for the New York Times that is attacking Donald Trump. There was an op-ed in the New York Times, an article written by an anonymous person claiming to be a White House official. And the op-ed basically said that Trump's own appointees are trying to stifle his agenda. Basically, trying to limit the damage that Trump, the madman, is doing. Fierce speculation surrounds who was responsible for it, but but Mike Pence denied that it was him. The Donald himself has described the writer as gutless and the New York Times as phony.
So if the failing New York Times has an anonymous editorial, can you believe it? Anonymous, meaning gutless, a gutless editorial. We're doing a great job. The poll numbers are through the roof. Our poll numbers are great. And guess what? Nobody is going to come close to beating me in 2020 because of what we've done. We've done more than anybody ever thought possible it's not even 2 years. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, there he was. He was speaking to law enforcement officials somewhere at some event that was Trump there. Just on the Mike Pence thing, a guy called Jaron, is it Agan or Agan? Jaron Agan will say, he's Pence's communications director, and he tweeted that the vice president puts his own name on his op-eds. The New York Times should be ashamed, and so should the person who wrote the false, illogical and gutless op-ed. The communications director for Pence went on to say that the office of the vice president is above such amateur acts. Tell you what made me laugh today. Sky News has got a reporter called Ian Woods. He's based in DC and he's really excited about this story. He can't contain himself, and in his short report here he invokes Cluedo, horror films. Well, he just can't contain himself. Ian Woods.
People have compared this to the horror movie where people are trapped in a house and they discover that the killer is actually within the house itself, even though they've barricaded all the doors. And he's been under siege now for so many months, but to discover that there's an enemy within is causing, true astonishment both inside and outside the White House. So now the hunt is on for who is responsible. He's demanded that the New York Times essentially hand him over so that he can be accused of treason and publicly exposed. If indeed it is a he, it might be a she. They haven't actually said. But the game of White House Cluedo is underway as they try to identify who might be behind it. One of the people whose name was in the frame was Mike Pence, the vice president. Now, on the surface, he is intensely loyal to the president, but on the other hand, he's got most to gain if the Trump presidency was to come to a premature end. But the only real reason why he has been identified as someone who is likely to have written the article is the use of one word. That's lodestar. It's not a word that most people use. It means a shining example, and it was quoted in the context of John McCain. But lodestar is a word that Mike Pence, funnily enough, uses quite often, both in off-the-cuff interviews and in scripted speeches. And there's been plenty of cases of mashed up bits of interview showing that he uses this word lodestar a lot. So that's why he has been identified.
The very excitable Ian Woods there, very excited. Cluedo, horror films, a game of Cluedo at the White House. Well, Mike Pompeo is the Secretary of State, the chief diplomat of the United States. Of course, he used to head up the CIA. And Mike Pompeo says, well, I didn't do it.
If that piece is true, if it's accurate, if it's actually, I think they described it as a senior administration official, they should not well have chosen to take a disgruntled, deceptive, bad actor's word for anything and put it in their newspaper. And I'll answer your other question directly, because I know someone will say, gosh, you didn't answer the question. It's not mine.
It's not mine, says Mike Pompeo. Look, I'll say this again. I've said this more eloquently in the past and I've written about it. Let me explain where I am, and this is my theory, and as far as I understand, it's my theory alone. This is pure theatre. It's fiction. And it is fiction written by a hidden hand. Now, the players, Donald Trump and his administration and all the other Democrat and Republican politicians and the media, they're not in on it. They're being manipulated the same way the producers of a reality TV show throw scenarios at the unsuspecting contestants. None of it is real. It's like the West Wing in the age of Twitter, with live actors who don't know or understand that they are actors. And I've written and talked a lot about this in the last 4 years. This is pretty new, this. It's new theory. And the public laps it up and believes it is all real because the players sell it so well, because the players think it is real. And that is exactly what is going on. And that's linked to the work that I've been doing for the last few years on how the 24-hour-a-day news channels have replaced the serial dramas. They have replaced soap operas in people's homes. None of this is real. And this began not long after the Iraq War on September the 11th, when people began to turn away from politics and when people began to understand that politics is a game that is rigged, and it is rigged so badly that no change can ever be effected through it, ever. People were moving away. It was a dangerous, dangerous time for the hidden hand, for the ruling elite, the financial elite, because in order for their plans for humanity to progress, we must believe in the ability to change our own future through politics and through public life. That's what's going on. Trump is genuine insofar as that he doesn't know any of this. It all feels pretty real to him, but it isn't. None of it is real. And this nonsense about the op-ed, this is all scripted stuff. This is reality television producers scripting this and putting it out there to get a reaction. And the public are watching it on a day-by-day basis, like it's a reality TV show. And they chose, one of the reasons Trump was chosen, of course, because he's the perfect reality TV guy to put in there. And he's totally unaware of it. Completely and utterly unaware of it. But is being manipulated by it. As are the alternative right who believe in him. As are the lefties who believe in Clinton and Bernie Sanders and who believe in Jeremy Corbyn. It is a nonsense. All of this. but less than 0.00001% of people on this planet have any idea what's going on. That's what I believe, and we'll talk about that in the coming weeks and months in more depth. It is time to take a quick break. It is Thursday's programme. Guess who's joining me in a couple of minutes? It's only Tony Gosling back in 2.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Yeah, welcome back indeed. 24 and a half minutes past the hour. Lots of tweets coming in already. Hi to Dean Smith. How you doing, Dean? Are the Palestinians still driving their houses into Israeli bulldozers? You think Palestinians would learn it's not politically correct to enjoy a safe space, says Dean. Hi to Dee, hi to Sean McDonald, to Judy, hi to Charlotte. How you doing, Charlotte in Burnley there? Hi to Bob Stew, who's tweeted a link to that story covered by RT today, but not covered by many other bureaus. Not covered by many other bureaus, it must be said, the story that the Israelis are going to bulldoze that Palestinian, that Bedouin village there. Hi to Steve Gray, who says he's really liking listening to this programme at 5. Good to know that, Steve. To be honest, I've had very little, if any, complaints about starting 2 hours early. I think most people are just happy that it hasn't been shortened. The programme will never be shortened. It will always be a 2-hour programme. That's 2 hours Monday to Thursday and an hour on Sunday morning. Sunday View will be live this coming Sunday, by the way, at 11 a.m. on the usual channels. Should be connecting to Tony right about now. There's just a wee problem. He is there, but he's not picking up my call. So what I might do is I might take a tune while we figure out what it is wrong there. I'm sure we'll sort it out very quickly anyway. So then, this is the police. And every little thing she does is magic at 26 minutes past the hour. Thursday's Richie Allen Show. Thanks for listening to it. Good to be with you. Music from the police. Every little thing she does is magic. 28 and a half minutes past the hour. Thursday's Richie Allen Show. And we've connected with Tony Gosling, top man, the presenter of the politics show at BCfm, former BBC journalist, terrific writer as well, and probably the die-in of all things Bilderberg research, I would say anyway. Tony, welcome back to the programme. How are you?
Trying to keep Bristol sane still, Richie, and I think we're managing just about to keep on top of most of these world events and, you know, local and national events. I mean, there's so much nonsense coming out of the press nowadays, and what really irritates me is even the sort of questions a child would ask, like, why are the pictures of these two so-called Russian super spies who came all the way across from Moscow and failed to kill their target person with a nerve agent and then went back again, how come the pictures are both exactly the same second in the same place? How can the Russians both be in the same place at the same time? It looks to me immediately as if it's a rather a poor forgery of a CCTV timestamp.
Some of the stuff that I've heard in the last couple, I only came back to work on Monday, and trying to get back into it after a few weeks away, as you well know, is not always easy. And I was trying to figure out what was happening. I want you to explain in more detail, as if people have never heard before, about the CCTV in a second. Am I to understand, and I'm asking this seriously, this is not a setup, I genuinely am asking this, am I to understand that the British government want us to believe that these guys sprayed Novichok out of a perfume bottle onto a door handle, then chucked away the bottle? And am I to understand then that we're supposed to believe that a poor unfortunate couple or a man found the bottle, gave it to his wife, and she's now dead? Is that actually what we're supposed to believe, Tony?
Yeah. And
no way!
We're supposed to believe that the perfume bottle that had already been used, somehow, I imagine there must be fairies in the parks in Salisbury, but they magicked the bottle back into its sealed container, sealed in cellophane as well. So the people who were the victims of the second round of attacks by so-called attacks by Novichok in Amesbury testified that the perfume bottle was all wrapped, and they had to open it. It was sealed, a sealed, new bottle. So there are all sorts of anomalies. I mean, not least of which is, why did it take something like an hour and a half for this deadly nerve agent, just a few grams of which you get on your skin, kills you within a few minutes, for it to start acting? And then when it did start acting, it didn't actually kill the people it was supposed to be killing. This, I think, is part of a much bigger game, and it's a similar sort of load of nonsense than we've been sold on the 7/7 attacks, the 9/11 attacks, and all this kind of stuff. So I think we're just being sold a pup. And the main object, it seems to me, is not to catch criminals who are running around with nerve agents in Britain. It's actually to expel Russian diplomats, to reduce the possibility of diplomatic solutions to what looks like a war stoking up in the Middle East.
I did something a little bit disrespectful a second ago. I should have mentioned the lady by name. Dawn Sturgis is the lady that died. I don't mean to be disrespectful. It just occurred to me I should have named her. Her name is Dawn Sturgis, of course. It's alleged that her friend Charlie Rowley gave her a bottle and it was contaminated. Now, whether she died that way or another way, of course, is up for debate, and everything is up for debate. Tony, let me ask you this. You'll be aware that Charlie Rowley, you see, your work on the 7th of July, along with one or two others, was very instrumental in me when I was living in Spain, deciding to make programs like this. And you know this to be true. I'm not, blowing smoke at you. That's a fact. Tony's work on, throwing up all the inconsistencies in the 7/7 story. I understand that a friend of Charlie Rowley's is saying that he's fighting for his life with meningitis, and that he's lost the use of his legs and he can't see. I don't know how true any of that is, but if that is true, there will be people who will say, well, Charlie Rowley will know the truth about, will have some truth about the reality of all of this, and maybe somebody's trying to shut him up. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, quite feasible, because the Skripals can't talk. I would imagine that that's part of their MI6 contract. They will be told that, you're working for British intelligence. You can't just go wandering into TV studios and chit-chat, because we can't be sure what you'll say, especially on a live program. So I think basically Charlie and Dawn are really unwitting victims of this whole business. It looks to me as if it doesn't look as if the sort of symptoms that Charlie and Dawn died of have anything really much to do with Novichok. It looks to me much more like some other kind of, problem. Obviously, we've heard the meningitis, but also there's this fentanyl which was going around. We were told in I think it was the Swindon Advertiser or the Wiltshire Times, the beginning of the month when this second Amesbury attack happened. There was a warning from the local police Wiltshire Police, that fentanyl was going around. Now, fentanyl is this particularly toxic form of artificial man-made heroin, which is extremely dangerous and much more powerful than ordinary heroin, and often kills people when dealers are giving them fentanyl instead of proper heroin. And so there was a warning went around before that. Now, we do know, we haven't been given exact details, but we do know that both Charlie and Dawn were users of these hard drugs, and so it might just simply be that they've had a batch of this stuff. Now, I did notice as well, it took 3 days after they were taken ill for it to be announced that it was anything whatsoever to do with Novichok, and that was after the anti-terror police had come down from London to intervene and to explain that, this is a very serious nerve agent incident, and to link it to the previous Skripal attack. I mean, I just think it's a pack of lies, the whole thing, I'm afraid, and none of it actually sits in any way, for me, as something which is believable. There's a lot that doesn't make sense, and it's great to see also that some of the BBC, I think it was Daniel Sanford at the press conference yesterday, actually also asking some very awkward questions which they couldn't answer. You know, occasionally the journalists actually do their job, and he's done a fantastic job by actually asking. He wants the details, which is what all journalists should want. Like, what visa did these people come into the country for? There's 2 of them, Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Boshirov. And who are they? Are they actually working for the Russian GRU, the military intelligence? And if you think that they are, then how do you know that they are, and why are they? And how do you get this information? But more importantly, you must know how they entered the country, what visas they've entered the country on, so how long possibly they were here, which all might help other people around the country trace, where they were at any one time, and give eyewitness statements. I saw them, preparing the Novichok somewhere, maybe. I mean, they may have done it somewhere in public, who knows? But, I mean, there's just no detail, and it's good to see at least a few journalists asking a few questions, which the police then sort of roll their eyes and say, well, we haven't thought up that one yet, so we better come up with an excuse.
That's right, and of course you're right, it is good to see those questions. The problem is they don't get a chance to ask follow-up questions, and at a later press conference in a few days' time they'll be ignored, those journalists, and we know they won't be allowed to. Oh, by the way, do you remember that question I asked you 3 days ago? Have you got an answer now? Tony Gosling is our guest. Tony, what's this? They put out images of people going through passport control, and one of them seems to show something impossible happening. You alluded to this a few minutes ago, where 2 people are going through the same passport control thing at exactly the same time simultaneously. Tell us about this, because this is beyond bizarre.
Well, what the authorities are saying was that they were going through 2 different photo identification booths at exactly the same second. So that it's not, they haven't faked these numbers, that actually they were going through, and it just so happens that it was at the same second that they were in 2 separate booths. But it does look like the same one. I know who the chap that pointed this out, Craig Murray, former Uzbekistan ambassador, who was there for the final dismantling of the Russian version of Porton Down, and something we've always got to just keep banging on about. The obvious source for this Novichok, if Novichok it is Porton Down. It's 3 or 4 miles away from the scene of both of these so-called crimes, and we know that, and I've heard basically from an army source, that it would be extremely surprising if they did not have manufactured small quantities of Novichok at Porton Down, because they use this for comparison, for identification, and that sort of thing. So maybe the police should simply be able to, or forensics should just simply be able to go into Porton Down, have a good old look around, see what Novichok they've got there, and see if the stuff that the police, anti-terror police, have found on this door handle matches the chemical signature of the stuff in Porton Down, which it might well do, just a few minutes down the road.
Very good point.
And the other thing which links the two is that we know that Dawn Sturgis and Charlie Rowley's family were working for the military. That means probably Boscombe Down or Porton Down, around the Salisbury area. So it could even be that close. One of the family members could have been involved in all of this. All I'm saying is I don't believe a word of the Russian connection. And I suppose there is an outside chance that it might just possibly be the Russians. If so, they have done something they've never done before, which is to act in the most incredibly incompetent. Not only did they send these guys in to do this assassination, so-called assassination of somebody that was of absolutely no use whatsoever to the British intelligence anymore. He'd been a long time over here, and there would be no information that he could possibly pass to the British intelligence services that might be of any use whatsoever in any kind of diplomatic or military conflict with the Russians. So he was a completely pointless person to assassinate. So number one, they sent these people over apparently to kill someone that there was absolutely no point in killing. And secondly, there is this whole background to this, which is the increasing tension with the Russians in Syria. As we're in a situation now where Idlib is about to be finally liberated by the Russians and the Syrian army, and this means that the US, UK, French attempt to overthrow Assad has now finally hit the buffers and totally failed. So they're looking, I think, to do anything they can to punish the Russians for beating them in the field, and they've been doing it in this rather cowardly fashion through the press and through manufacturing lies against the Russian government and expelling diplomats.
Absolutely, the timing is very, very interesting as well, with the Russians launching air raids against jihadist positions on Monday, and then this comes out. That's a very good point. Let me just read out about 2 or 3 tweets. Unsurprisingly, we're getting a lot of tweets. We do usually when you're on, Tony. Derek tweets, none of this Novichok stuff makes any sense at all. It's to ramp up the drums of war. The Western NATO countries are nothing but warmongers. What will it be like in 5-10 years from now if this is allowed to go on? Just before you come back on that, let me read a couple of others because they're running away from me. Moinga tweets, when the government tries to give a new Novichok theory, it basically collapses within a few minutes or a few hours of the theory being put
Absolutely
out.
Right. Yeah.
Within
These
minutes.
things don't stand any test at all.
Ricky tweets, maybe it's the finding of Mossad agents, just throwing it out there. Well, it's easy to blame Israel for everything. Maybe blame Israel for tripping over banana skin. But fair enough, I take the comment. Bob tweets, Bob Stew, if Russian assassins are sent to kill a target, they usually get the job done. I call bullshit all over this poisoning story. Very good point there about where will we be in 5 or 10 years if this stuff is allowed to go unchecked. By stuff we mean if the government is allowed to continually bring us to the brink of very serious conflict with world superpowers by inventing stories, by increasing tensions. If it carries on and on and on and we don't do anything about it, where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years?
Well, a mincemeat, basically. Look, there's another thing as well, and there is the staging of this press conference. Of course, this is also on the first day of the opening of Parliament here in Britain. So it becomes a sort of massive event where Theresa May does a statement to Parliament. Of course, she does it after Prime Minister's questions, so that there's no chance for any of the opposition MPs to cross-examine her at Prime Minister's questions. They've got to wait a whole nother week before there's any opportunity to do that. And the timing of it is laughable, really. I think it just shows what a limp, pathetic government we've got. I mean, let's just take a step back for a second, because Theresa May was never elected, not even by the Conservative Party, to be Conservative leader. She stood against Andrea Leadsom, and Andrea Leadsom just fell on her sword before the time of the leadership election, and so Theresa May had got a bye, basically. The other thing is, of course, we had the election last year, which Theresa May lost, and then she's had to go to the DUP to get a few MPs in order to just about hang on to a majority with her fingernails. It's not a majority, it's a minority, but she's just about hanging in there. These people have no credibility. This is the other thing. I don't think, for me, the ability of Theresa May to deal with fast-moving situations, to explain herself in any kind of credible way, is nowhere. And Jeremy Corbyn, I think, did an excellent job at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday in pulling her up on, okay, so what have you done to try to get to the bottom of this alongside the Russians? It's obvious they have no interest in working with the Russians. If they wanted to get to the bottom of what happened in Salisbury and Amesbury, then they would want to do that. But they don't want to do that, and that's actually the point.
You made a very good point, Tony. Sorry to interrupt you. You made a very good point a minute ago. The point you made about investigators getting access to Porton Down to A, confirm they have samples of Novichok, which they should do, and B, to confirm if those match the samples that were recovered in Salisbury. Now, the Russians, whatever anybody thinks about the Russians or doesn't think, they're entitled to that. They're entitled to say, well, look, we should do that. That's a very good point there. I want to talk more about Corbyn.
It'd be interesting, wouldn't it? If say, for example, the Home Office or MI5, who's really this is their territory, had gone to the Russians, to the Russian embassy, and said, "Look, this is a mystery to us. This is a mystery to us. Can you help?" It would be interesting. Now, would the Russians ignore them? Well, I doubt it. But if they did, that would also make it. Be more evidence that it actually might be the Russians, because they were feeling guilty and they didn't want to help, but they haven't even bothered to do that, to try to see if there can be any kind of cooperation between the two countries in getting to the bottom of this. The British have made it absolutely clear that they've already decided that the Russians are guilty, even though there is actually no evidence whatsoever, apart from these photographs of two people who haven't even been properly identified with their proper names, it seems, or visas or passport numbers given, that sort of thing, so that the whole world would know, who may have those guys on their passport systems, that the British are not lying about who is supposedly done this.
Check out Bilderberg.org, Tony Gosling. Tony's going to stay with me for another 15 minutes. We're tight today. We're not ordinarily. We're loose. I know Tony's got plenty to do as well. We're tight. We can only stay to the top of the hour. I want to change tack slightly. Bilderberg.org, BCfm, the politics show. I'll tweet out the links to it. You know all about it anyway. Many of our listeners catch the politics show with Tony Gosling. Tony, the capitulation, at least I'm categorising it, or I'm labelling it a capitulation by the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, to the Zionist lobby in the UK. Do you think it was a capitulation to adopt the IRA, as it's called, the IHRA, the Holocaust Remembrance Association, their alleged legal definition of what it is to be anti-Semitic? I kind of predicted that Corbyn would collapse. I believe he has done. Maybe you'll give us a different point of view. What do you think?
Well, the politicians and the commentators in Israel do quite regularly compare other politicians to Nazis. And yet it seems that if anyone in other parts of the world does that, then they've got to be anti-Semitic. No, look, this is just an attempt to shut debate down about what's going on over in Israel and Palestine. We had last week Benjamin Netanyahu standing outside his nuclear facilities where he makes nuclear weapons, threatening to nuke Iran. That was just last week. And the unbelievable lack of coverage of those comments made by the Israeli Prime Minister shows you everything, really. The Israelis have got an exceptionalism in this country. They have an absolute buy when it comes to any kind of criticism. And it's only when they do something utterly atrocious and utterly appalling, and they do it openly and they admit to it, and they can't wriggle out of it, that there is any coverage whatsoever. This is also, I think, linked to the obsessive fanaticist nature of Christian Zionism, where there are quite a lot of Christians out there, not just Jews. I mean, in fact, most Jews wouldn't agree with it, but there are a lot of Christians in the United States particularly who believe that Netanyahu is some kind of on some kind of mission from God, and there are various Bible verses which are quoted very selectively in order to make it look as if, for stupid people, that is what Netanyahu is. So that's where we are, is threats, amazingly. Nuclear threats to attack Iran from Dimona, the nuclear facility, and almost no reporting whatsoever. So things are hotting up over in the Middle East. So it's almost as if, as Assad reclaims the parts of Syria, as if, of course, he's quite entitled to do under international law, and invite anybody he wants into Syria to help him do that, including the Iranians, as it looks as if he gets his country back. So we see more and more nonsense coming from the other direction, and particularly against Corbyn.
So why did Corbyn? Why did he acquiesce, Tony? Why did Jeremy? Why has he behaved in the kind of a limp-fisted, for want of a better way of putting it? He's been kind of broken and mumbling and fumbling for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Why didn't Jeremy Corbyn, with the enormous support that he has in the party.
It's simple. I think it's because he wants to be seen to be bending over backwards to not be anti-Semitic. And of course, this actually does play quite well with Jewish members of the Labour Party and Jewish people generally, who are maybe interested in siding with the Zionists on this. So, he's doing everything he can. He's bending over backwards as much as he can. And so I think, I can see why he's doing it. I wouldn't personally agree with it like you. I think he's probably doing too much. And actually, every sign of weakness like that is just another excuse to attack him. But of course, people like Margaret Hodge, who've led this attack from within the Labour Party against Corbyn, and this is just recycling the old attacks from the last few years of trying to unseat Corbyn, all because of his support for the Palestinians, all because of his condemnation of Israel for the 2,000 or so dead and 5,000 injured and 30,000 made homeless during Operation Cast Lead back in 2008, 2009. Corbyn was one of the main speakers at the rally against that in London, and he was absolutely condemning Israel, as, of course, any right-thinking person was in the world. But that was his crime. And as regards the Israel lobby, they have decided he's going to have to be removed. And let's not forget last year's programme back in January on Al Jazeera, which showed that there was £1 million slush fund from the Israeli embassy for anyone that wanted to try and agitate against Corbyn and pro-Israeli within the Labour Party. This is money going into the Labour Party for any individual Labour member that wants to start some sort of group to bash Corbyn over the head because of his support of the Palestinians. There is a massive slush fund there. Now, MI5, if they were worth half a cent, which they're not, or half a penny, would be in there arresting those people for interfering in British politics. The Israelis were even saying that they were going to topple a government, that's a Tory defence minister. So this has been almost ignored, the total interference by what they're trying to do, really, Richie, I think, is to bring about in Britain the same kind of control over politics that the Israel lobby has in the United States. And I don't honestly think that that's going to happen.
It's incredibly ironic that the Trump administration has been dealing for forever, really, it seems like forever anyway, with allegations of collusion between members of his campaign and the Russian government, while there's absolutely no real evidence that, I'm not saying there hasn't been manipulation, and we could talk about that all night long, but there's no real hardcore evidence that people working with him or him himself or his family were working with Russia. You have that on the one hand, and then you have the scenario you described, that Shai Massoud, that brilliant piece of journalism by Al Jazeera, which was ignored completely by the UK broadcast media anyway. I mean, if ever there was an example of interference, I mean, you summed it up brilliantly, why wouldn't MI5 be all over that? I mean, it's incredibly ironic that you get wall-to-wall coverage of Russia and the United States. This went on and is going on in this country. And apart from yourself, apart from this programme, one or two other programmes, one or two other websites, the UK media just does not want to know. Well, what will it do then, Tony? I mean, with the Chequers publication, or the Chequers plan for Theresa May's plans or her offer to the European Union for a deal collapsing because neither Brexiteers nor Remainers want it. I'm convinced that there will have to be an election early next year. If Corbyn, it's one of those, he'd almost have to commit career suicide or some sort of unprecedented political suicide not to at least enter government in a coalition with the Lib Dems. Is that how you see things going in the next 6 to 8 months?
Actually, I don't think so. No. I think we're looking at a Conservative Party that's just going to cling on to power like a limpet, and they're going to be staying as long as they can. I mean, I think with the DUP and their links to the Orange Order, the Conservative Party, their links to Freemasonry and the establishment, we're looking at a really, really strong establishment party. Isn't it amazing to see the coverage that there's been of the Labour National Executive over the last few days, making this decision about the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which of course is really just there to protect Israel from criticism, and it's actually a thought criminals charter. What they're trying to do is to make criticism of evil people who kill and murder for racist reasons, they're making criticism of that. They're trying to make it an expellable offence from British politics. They've already expelled Ken Livingstone, who's a potential leader of the Labour Party, former mayor of London, and a long-time Labour, very, very well-respected Labour guy, for simply stating a historic fact. And he's been expelled. So they've actually, I think, they may smell blood having gotten rid of Livingstone. And so they're going for everything they possibly can. By the way, Margaret Hodges' daughter is, I believe her name is Alison, I'm not sure of her second name, but she's a senior editor at the BBC television. So she's one of the people who's making decisions about how this coverage takes place. And of course, Margaret Hodge is an extremely powerful and important figure on the Blairite Labour Party. So what we're getting is a gang mentality really forming, where you've got Blairites and Tories deciding on which direction the attack on Jeremy Corbyn is going to come on tonight's news.
Tony Gosling is our guest. Thanks for the tweets. Lots of tweets on this, and of course on Novichok. So, are you saying, Tony, that if you had to make a wager or a bet on it before Labour was to come to power, if there was any real danger of that the Zionists would do for Corbyn beforehand?
Well, almost certainly. I mean, I don't think that the Conservative Party at the moment is in a terrifically fragile position. There's a lot of people ever since last year's knife edge election been saying, oh, well, there'll be a general election soon. And this is just wishful thinking. I'm afraid a lot of people are very into this, but I try and be as realistic as possible. I don't think we're looking at, in any way at an election soon. Theresa May's popularity is extremely low. She's made a total mess of Brexit. If there was another election, even with a new Conservative leader, I don't think that the Conservatives would stand much of a chance getting in. So why on earth would they call another election all the time they can do these dodgy deals with the DUP and hang on in there? It doesn't. I mean, I don't think their interest, Richie, is anything to do with what would be best for the country.
Of course not.
They're interested in how much they can cling on to power.
You're 100% right, Tom. But let me jump in. The reason I think an election is imminent is because I think the European Union, which today has been reported, Michel Barnier today has been reported to have said that they find interesting things in the Chequers plan. But I think ultimately the European Union doesn't want the Chequers plan. They want complete and utter capitulation by the UK government. And I think they'll let that clock run right down and down and down and down and down. And in the autumn and over Christmas and in the very, 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 very early January time, I think there's going to be huge movement for this second referendum. There's going to be all sorts of doomsday scenarios put on television and on radio about the possibility of crashing out without a deal. And I think by then her position might become untenable, and that might lead then to to her stepping down and to that's what, I could be wrong.
Leader,
I mean, I'm often wrong. Go ahead, Tony. I'm often wrong. Go on.
There may be a new leader, certainly, but as regards the general election, I doubt it. Sorry, to go back a sec. It's Victor Lewis Smith, the comedian and writer, that tweeted, and here it is a quote from the 20th of August. I just discovered that Lizzie Watson is her name. Lizzie Watson,
yeah.
Senior BBC news editor is Margaret Hodges' daughter. This goes unreported. If she were Corbyn's second cousin twice removed, it would be front page news. So,
it certainly
great
would.
point by Victor Lewis Smith. Absolutely brilliant. And of course, the idea is we're not supposed to know that there are these Zionist connections into the very top of the BBC. When I was working there, I saw these Zionists turning up who had no gifts, no talent for what they were doing, but they'd clearly been just given the job because of their political persuasion. And that's what it seemed to me anyway, that you're someone that's going to be on side and whatever and do the right thing and pliable, and we're going to give you a job as a result. So that was what I was seeing when I was at the corporation in 1989, 1990. I could see these people arriving and appearing in desks, and I was thinking, well, you don't really seem to have any aptitude for this job. In fact, you're losing us listeners, that sort of thing, for one of the senior producers, for example, and yet the appointments continued. And that, I think, was, I could see the beginning of the end of the corporation as an organisation which was content with itself and actually fulfilling what it was supposed to be, that is independent in its BBC charter.
Tony, great stuff. Remind our listeners, I saw the same thing happen in Irish media as well. Remind our listeners how to listen to the Politics Show on BCfm.
Well, we do cover as much as, but we do international stuff as well, Richie. So we did last week, for example, an exclusive interview with a guy called Joshua Wong, who at the age of 16 organised the umbrella protests over in Hong Kong, which brought 250,000 people out onto the streets, worried and nervous that there's an authoritarian regime was taking over where they wouldn't have any freedom of speech, that if they criticised anything to do with the government, as Hong Kong gets swallowed up by China, that they would be jailed for anything up to 6 months. Laughing at the flag, this sort of thing, is a jail sentence of 6 months. So they are very, very nervous over there. And Joshua had an awful lot of interesting things to say about the resistance, actually. And it is resistance in Hong Kong to this, which I think the Chinese had better think twice before they try and impose anything on that city, because even though it wasn't democratic when we were running it, at least we allowed freedom of speech. For goodness sake, the Chinese government have got no interest in that anymore.
No,
anyway, so if you want to pick up on all this sort of stuff we do on the Fridays, that is thisweek.org.uk. Pretty simple. We've got a terrorism discussion forum, which is 911forum.org.uk, and the good old bilderberg.org website. And I'm over to actually going to Holland, to the scene of the crime, the first Bilderberg meeting in a couple of weeks' time, to do a seminar in Oosterbeek about the origins of the Bilderberg and also about Operation Market Garden, which I think was a major factor in delaying the end of the war. And it's one of the reasons why the Bilderberg conferences started in exactly the same place as this battle took place back in 1954.
Sounds brilliant, Tony. We'll enjoy that. I look forward to speaking to you again real soon, and we'll tweet out links for those who might be new to the Politics Show. Thanks for coming on today, mate. Great stuff. Speak soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. God bless. Thank you very much.
You too, buddy. Bye for now. Tony Gosling live on the line there from Bristol. It's exactly the top of the hour, 30 seconds past 6 as I speak with you live. If you're listening to it later, it won't be live, of course. Makes some sort of sense, doesn't it? The programme's available to listen back to grab on demand from Podomatic.com, from iTunes, of course, from Spotify, and you can get it on YouTube. A lot of people happy with that. I'm really kind of pleased with that myself. One of the things that has worked out about moving the programme to 5 p.m. UK time means that I can render the YouTube version of the show. First of all, I take the music out of it so there are no copyright issues, and I put it on YouTube then, and it is going live on YouTube around about 2.5 hours after it ends, whereas previously the show wasn't appearing on YouTube until the following day. So that's a really good thing. And I noticed a few people emailing and putting messages on Twitter saying it meant it was good for them that they were getting it on YouTube earlier than previously. But remember, lots of places to hear the programme. It is streaming constantly on richieallen.co.uk, my website as well. We're live right now on Fab Radio 2. Check out fabradiointernational.com. That is Manchester's finest and the most successful internet radio station in the world. Check out, of course, TuneIn Radio, but do download the Cogent Radio app. And you can do that by going to triggerwarning.tv. There are links there to Cogent Radio. The programme can be listened to there as well. Triggerwarning.tv, terrific programming on there as well. Hayden Hewitt, the Trigger Warning Show with Graham Booth. A lot of really interesting and very well put together independent content, completely independent through, as I said, triggerwarning.tv, Hayden Hewitt, and he's putting a lot of interesting people on the radio these days. So he is, right, 2.5 minutes past the hour, past 6. Let's have a very quick break. When I come back, plenty more. And Tina Louise Rothery joins the programme real soon. You don't want to miss Tina.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structure and application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
Right. Something was supposed to happen even there, and it didn't. So there you go. What was supposed to happen? What was supposed to happen? All right, this was supposed to happen.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Yeah, I didn't have to do that there. I just wanted to make sure it was working. Live radio and all of that. Welcome back to the programme. 5 minutes past the hour. Tina Louise Rothery has stepped in. She's here, and she'll be with me in about 2 minutes' time. One of the most remarkable people I've ever met through this programme. Tina joins us in a couple of minutes' time. Want to say hi to my mate Phil Restino in Florida, a guest on this programme as well, and he will be again in the future. On my depiction of public life as theatre and as scripted drama, properly scripted, and, you know, with unsuspecting actors, real live actors and actresses who don't know they are actors and actresses. Phil says, I'm with you, Richie, just as you're describing all the people buying into the theatre. Not one of those reality TV news outlets reporting on the US or the UK, Israeli and Saudi sponsored slaughters of innocents in Yemen or Syria or Palestine or Africa or Ukraine. Absolutely right, there is no coverage of what's happening in Palestine, no coverage of the bulldozing, the imminent bulldozing of a Bedouin village there by the Israelis in the next day or so. No coverage of that. No coverage of the slaughter of Yemeni folks, innocent people who've never done anything wrong to anybody, a country that is no threat whatsoever to any other, let alone its neighbours. No coverage. And that is why the independent media is doing what it's doing. But it's very difficult to do it. And it's not, you know, this is not an appeal for funding at all. It's not about that. When I say it's not easy to do it, I mentioned on a little video I made outdoors today, which is on YouTube. I make these daily videos now where I tell you who's coming up on the next programme. And I mentioned today the shadow banning of content creators, not just this programme, but many others. YouTube, Google, being the only game in town, can limit or completely put a halt to the reach of programs like this, and that is what they are doing. And that is why, I'm not going to go into this long-winded preamble now, but that is why your own website, get your own websites, your own WordPress sites, your own website, and go to our websites, go to the richieallen.co.uk website to listen to the videos, to listen to the podcasts. Don't depend on the content hosters like Google and YouTube to treat people like me fairly and others fairly. They won't. Shadow banning. It's massive. 7 minutes past the hour. Let's get our next guest on the programme then. She's a remarkable woman. I don't really know how to describe her. She's been a politician. She is a politician. She's a prominent member of the Green Party. I mentioned earlier on at the top of the hour that it's probably fair to say that she'd be a life member, an honorary member for life of the Nanas. She is a massive thorn in the side of the multinational corporations that want to frack in this country. And she spends most of her time protesting at fracking sites in the northwest of the country, but not only protesting at these sites, also educating people who are coming around, who are coming by, to find out what all the fuss is about. Like my conversation with Tony, I'm not finding it too easy to connect to her now imminently. I'm phoning her, so let's just wait and see can we get her. If not, we might have to call the old phone there. Let me just do this while I'm chatting with you. Strange today. It's been good all week, the old Skype. Let me just right. Yeah. It's been good all week, but today we've had one or two little niggly things. So let's wait and see can we get Tina on the programme. 9 minutes past the hour. We've got some music lined up. We can do that. No harm in it while we're sorting it out. It's David Bowie on the Richie Allen Show. A song called Starman. Lots of tweets this afternoon. That's good. Keep those tweets coming in. At Richie Allen Show is my Twitter handle. I love hearing from you. That's genuine. And I will be reading out more of your tweets before the end of this programme. Starman back with Tina, hopefully. Right, let's leave David Bowie there then and welcome Tina Louise Rothery back to the programme. Tina, welcome back.
Hi, Richie. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I'm so...
Oh, what a relief.
What a relief is right. I've only been back a few days after an extended break, an unplanned extended break, and it went all smooth this week. And I thought, not now. Let's not have any technical problems now. You missed my introduction. I was talking all about the Nanas. I said you're going to be an honorary life member forevermore of the Nanas. Your legal battles, of course, with Quadrilla, your defeat of them, you've been a thorn in their side forever. All the incredible work that's going on in the Northwest, protesting this, educating people. It's massive, and you've not been on for ages. And I kind of said today, it's important that you update us as to what's going on. I'll tell you why, Tina. Nobody in this country, no newspaper or television or radio program in this country, in the mainstream, is covering this. And I believe it's one of the most serious things facing humanity in the 21st century. I really do. So I'm just going to give you the floor. What's been going on, Tina, since we spoke last?
Well, it is supremely important because it affects air, water and growing soil. But every other debate we can have in life doesn't matter without quality air, water and growing soil. So that's one reason it's important. One of the reasons also is our human rights. You know, right now, and this isn't being covered by the press, there are injunctions being taken all over the country against persons unknown, which is everyone, about coming anywhere near the frack sites, about interfering. We used to be able to slow walk. And I can honestly say that the difference between how I spend my days now as to how I spent them 4 months ago, it's going, from a free life to, I don't know, maybe North Korea or something. Suddenly I can't slow walk, we can't detain, we can't in any way or have any right to peaceful protest has any effect. They're basically saying stand across the road with a banner. So it took a while for us, but once they have an injunction in place now to prevent us from going near them. But then we went back across the road. But now what they do is they film us and they film everything we do so that they can make a case against us that is say, it's not so bad for me. I gave up all my assets, so that's all right. I'm willing to take the hit, as are a few others. But for people who just want to come and protest, if they have assets, then the fine might not be too high on a civil case, but it's the court costs could go up to £150,000.
Yeah.
It's quite mad, but they've managed to, through economic means, prevent protest. And that's just incredible that they can do that. It's exhausting that protesters go through the court systems, for, blockading or, not allowing the trucks to proceed. But, that is the way it goes. And they have to see that there is objection and we have to have outlet for our objection. And it's so hard to be heard. But yeah, so injunctions are taking place all over the country. They're being challenged all over the country. But the injunctions will impact protest of any kind, because I can see.
Tina, hang on a second. Hang on just 1 second. You're breaking up a bit. It's really good for a couple of seconds, then you're breaking up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to phone the mobile, right? So I'll phone the mobile because this is too important. And I'm sure we'll have...
Oh, okay then.
Yeah, we'll have no problem on the mobile there. This is too important. She's talking there about the fracking companies and how they... using the legal system and using the police in this country, how they are basically shutting down protests and how they're hitting protesters in the pocket. Small civil fines, but the court costs going up to, six figures because the protester, found guilty of breaching an injunction would then incur the cost of the fracking company's legal representation, their barristers. This is sickening stuff, and it's very important. So I'm going to dial her while I'm talking to you now. This is great. You see, if you ever thought, it's amazing, Richie, with Richie's big team of researchers and producers. There are no researchers and producers here. When I was on live commercial radio, I'd have 2 or 3 people doing this stuff for me, so I wouldn't have to do it. Right, okay. And then there's a 4 in there somewhere. Can't read the number out live on air, of course. I'm prone to saying numbers as I'm typing them. Let's do, and then okay, right. So I'm going to call her now. It's going to be like one of those live radio shows where you're ringing somebody to give them a prize, or I've rung the wrong person, which will be funny. Let's see which it is.
Hi, Richie.
You see, I was kind of hoping for a second it was the wrong number. Like on a live show when you're giving somebody a prize. Now, this is serious. The line's 1,000 times better. So what they're doing now is it's an all-out assault from these multinational companies to try and eliminate protesting against what they're doing. You described there how they're going to try and hit them in the pocket with civil fines, but the costs will be astronomical. Talk more about that, Tina, because this is massive, this.
Yeah, well, because it impacts way beyond just the anti-fracking community. This will be disability rights, anti-war, anything you can think of. I can see, sort of, if you imagine that a planning application goes in any town, and they know it's got to be objected to, whether it's for a dump or for greenbelt development or additional housing and things like that, then at the same time, they will probably seek to put an injunction in place just to make sure that no one rises up. And, right now we're looking at government also making planning applications smoother and easier for companies like Quadrilla and the other drilling companies, so that they can just slide through the process with literally as much ease as getting planning for a shed. So all our rights are being snatched out from under us. Our ability to protest and raise the alarm, our ability to at least watch it go through a full process of planning so that at least there are some safeguards in place, are now being taken away. This is, it's quite worrying times on a broader scale. And when you think about the incompetence of the government, which is very easily thought about, on so many things, I really wanted to tell you about one example. They talk about having gold standard regulations for fracking, that everything will be thoroughly checked and perfect and probably as well as they did in the banking crisis, really. But I want to tell you about the guy who did a lot of the advising in the UK. His name was Chris Faulkner, and he came across from the States, Texan guy, and he was advising the Welsh Parliament in 2013. Along with 16 other ministers on how to proceed with fracking and how great it was, how they drill under this, that, and the other, and there's no problems. He's just been arrested and he's now in a jail in Texas. His experience in the oil and gas industry is literally as someone who runs websites for the oil and gas industry. He's arrested on charged with securities fraud, illegal monetary transactions, and just a whole rake of other dirty deeds.
No way.
And he's considered a flight risk, so he's currently in prison awaiting his trial. So a man who knew nothing from a scientific or an engineering aspect of the industry was advising our government. It's quite astounding how incredibly flawed the system is, and that from every angle, not only can't we protect ourselves, we can now trust implicitly that they are incapable of protecting us in government, because they won't even seek honest advice or check the credentials of the people giving them that advice.
One of the biggest problems, I grew up in the Republic of Ireland, as you know, and many years ago we had the Sunday World, which was a bit like the News of the World. Now, there were a lot wrong with those papers. There was a lot wrong with the News of the World, and of course there was a lot wrong with the Sunday World, with doing sleazy sex stories and all of that. But there was also a lot of brilliant investigative journalism, and it sounds to me like what we need now, and there's a dearth of it. We don't have it. We need investigative journalists to find out at the highest levels of government who's getting brown envelopes, who's in bed with some of these people that's allowing what is an outrage, because this is a national scandal, Tina. But we don't have access. We don't have, of course I don't, I'm on my own. There are other content creators who make radio and TV, and they do a very good job. Some of them better presenters than me, but they don't have producers and people out of it, because we're living from hand to mouth the same way you are.
Yeah, exactly.
It's dreadful, isn't it? So
we're
what do
in
you
no
do?
position to mount a defence. I mean, we're fortunately anti-fracking movement that we grew fast and people got it quick, and it's full of people with diverse skills, which has allowed us to advance. Because I think it's such a broad-reaching thing, because it's air and water. It wasn't limited to students fighting to get out of debt, or hospital staff fighting for their jobs and the well-being of their patients. This is a broad sector of society fighting this, and that's proved well, because we have people in our group who are on all-party parliamentary groups, and we have people who are jumping on trucks and everything in between. We have counsellors and doctors and retired midwives and people from every sector of society nourishing our fight. So we know we're being well informed. And when you think, when you talked about those connections, there is one guy, and he's amazing. He's worth looking up. His name is Paul Mobbs, Mobbs. He's just incredible. He actually got himself deliberately arrested in Downing Street, outside Downing Street. Deliberately, with all of his paperwork attached to his body, knowing that by doing that they'd have to enter it in as evidence. And his paperwork showed all those links, and it's called the frackometer, and none of us can really understand it terribly well because he's a genius. But it's there, and all the links are there. And I said to him once, could you not get whoever did the London Underground map to do that again, because that would help us to understand it better. He was like, no, that is the simple version, and I don't think it can get any simpler, but it does show all the links. You only have to look at, say, for instance, Lord Brown, who was originally head of Quadrilla, who was drilling here in Lancashire. And he said, we've got to do this because otherwise the Russians will hold us to ransom. Now, we get less than 1% of our gas from Russia. And he left Quadrilla and went to work for a Russian company. So, they're just liars.
That's sickening, Tina.
And ill-informed.
That's disgusting, that. I mean, you talk about revolving door. How blatant is that?
Yeah.
That's arrogant.
Completely.
Do you know? Yeah. Go on. Jesus. And it kills me.
Lord Brown does this thing. So what he does is, for a start, the first person to employ him into government is Francis Maud, who's the MP in Balkan, who first let fracking go ahead down there. Anyway, with Lord Brown's company, Quadrilla Drilling. Anyway, Lord Brown was called the Sun King because he was head of BP, and he's blamed for the Gulf of Mexico oil crisis because he did so many cost-cutting exercises while he was in charge of the company that even though he left like a year before the crisis, it was down to his cost-cutting exercises that the accident happened. And then he went back into government. Then he headed up the Royal Engineers Society. So he was key to that. And they later wrote a report on fracking that made it sound a lot better than it was. And then he was part of the Department of Energy and Climate Change, who were a key regulator for fracking. And then was able to stay influential in who they employed as he went along. So although he went into industry, he went back into government, then back into industry, then back into government, and remains throughout as a lord who also has a free reign. So you can see all the connections there. The fact that they're not even walking through the revolving door. I don't think it revolves. I think it's just permanently open and they wander in and out. Because they get away with it, like they do in academic institutions, by saying, well, we need this expertise that we don't have, so we'll get industry people in. Because our MPs are really not that well versed. Certainly none of them could take any of us on the subject because they don't have the time, energy, inclination to actually study it in the same way. Some do. But, like Barry Gardner from Labour came up the other day and, he's senior and he's shadow minister and was just aghast at the limitations since his last visit. And it wasn't until like the leaders of the Green Party came up when we just had the injunction and they came up to the roadside and we were on the other side of the road still trying to work out where in hell we could be to protest. Unfortunately, they took us across the road and said, well, we're just going to protest exactly where we did and how we did before. But it's challenging times and you're constantly butting your head against a brick wall of ignorance. So we're coming to London, though, so that's nice, on Wednesday, if anyone's around. And we're bringing about 80 of us down from Lancashire.
On Wednesday?
Yes, and it's it's been 100 years since the women got the vote. It was hard, obviously, it took a long time to get anywhere. But the point is that we felt, particularly the mothers and the grandmothers here in Lancashire, that 100 years ago the women fought really hard, and they were like force-fed, and they lost their families, and their kids were taken away, and they sacrificed everything just so that we can have a voice in our democracy. And yet here we are with our children under threat, and we can't be heard when we scream, no, this is dangerous, it's wrong, it's going to harm the kids. And that then they took the decision of our local council and they overturned that. So I think the vote that we fought for doesn't fit if it's not a democracy you live within. And it doesn't feel anything like a democracy anymore. So it makes that vote futile. And so we're going down on Wednesday as suffragettes to mark the 100 years since we started getting the vote, and to call on government. We've written to every MP to ask them to come outside and have their photograph taken with us to show which side they're on this debate about local democracy and about fracking. And so, that's what we're going to do. We're going to meet up with some other people down there, and then we'll go across to the Emily Pankhurst statue as well, because I understand that's at risk of being removed from the area and sent to a private college or something.
No way.
So that's our plan on Wednesday. So we're going to be there from about, there's 80 of us travelling down by coach, but there are others meeting us from the south. We'll be there about 10:30, and we'll stay until about 4:30. We've got various MPs already are going to come outside and speak to us, and it's PMQs that day. And fortunately, also, there's a debate in the morning, which only just got announced at 11 o'clock in the morning on fracking with an all-party parliamentary group. So there's quite a lot happening, which makes it a good day to be down there. But I don't know if you know why Wednesdays matters. I can't remember if I mentioned it before, but for 57 Wednesdays, so for 57 weeks, anywhere between 30 and 120 women have gone up to the frack site dressed in white, held a 15-minute silent vigil, and then spent 3 hours singing, dancing, and bringing joy to the road. Because it's a really, as you can imagine, it's been a dismal 600 days now, and that's how long we've been here. It's been mad. Every day we've been in protest. And if we didn't find things to bring us joy, I just think we'd die. It's Wednesdays is slightly different because even though the injunction happened, for some reason the judge excluded Wednesdays. I think because what we do on Wednesdays is not about anti-fracking. It's about calling for calm in a place that's got so fractious. The police violence, particularly last summer, was just intense. It's got a little easier, but then that's only because there's less that we can do. So we're less manhandled because we can't. I used to get lifted and carried 8-10 times a day, whereas now if I'm in a position to be lifted or carried, I'm then risking the breach of the injunction. It has been breached already a few times, and we're just waiting to see what happens with those cases. And then there was a letter in the press the other day from, who was it from? It was from Jenny Jones, and she said that, and Vivian Westwood, so a dame and a baroness, who said, we're coming up to Lancashire to breach the injunction, which will be amazing if they can, because, for regular people to do that, that's, life-changing for them, particularly their assets.
Well, I tell you what, if that happens, if they honour that pledge, Baroness Jenny Jones and Vivian Westwood, that'll be absolutely terrific. I'm also sure it'll be brilliant. I'm also sure that next week you'll get media coverage. I'm sure the Daily.
Yeah, well, we're doing a press release, and like sometimes, oddly enough, I was kind of semi-rowing with another person about doing the media, and it's because sometimes you angle things for mainstream media, and in all honesty, I'm so sick of that. I've done 7 years, and we've been highly successful in stopping fracking and building a movement without any help from the mainstream media. They have been vile or just ignored us. We get very little in, and when you do, you get maybe, 1.5 minutes on BBC or Sky, and it'll be the least impactful 1.5 minutes of you talk, And so I think jumping through hoops, and I wouldn't even consider them mainstream anymore. It's like old world media. Well, there's something else that happens. When we do our live streams, it may only get 1,000 on a day, but you'll be 10,000 by the end of the week, and it will keep on traveling long past broadcast time.
I love
through
those
shows like yours and Twitter. We have a good reach, and this reaches real people, not people who are tuned into the BBC and imagining its truth. So I think we possibly, although we do need to be concerned about about the old world media, because there's a generation that's still with us that believes in it, and they need to know too. But I think that eventually, and I think it is what's making the difference and why we managed to grow as a movement, is that really social and online has given us a lot more reach than we've ever had in our lives, where we had to rely previously only on the news at 10. We can now all source our information from loads of different places.
Well, you can be your own media. Your live streams are brilliant. I left Facebook personally about 4 or 5 months ago, and there's just my Facebook page for the show, but I personally left it, and that Facebook page for the show is being run by a friend of mine who remains anonymous, and I feel a bit guilty about that. I had to come off it personally because I hate it, but at the same time it was great to be able to see those live streams that you were doing, which are brilliant, and they're brilliantly shot and brilliantly optimistic, and then kind of relayed them. So I'm going to try and work out a way that I can do that. You have to be your own media, and you've done that. You have to become the media, basically. And
it's not fun, it really isn't. But you do it because it provides evidence. And again, discussions I've had with other activists will be, well, you risk an activist if you're live streaming because they might do something that then gets them in trouble and can be used as evidence. And in all honesty, no. Because in 7 years, I've not seen us do anything that wasn't noble, honourable and good. And any violence has come as a result of a scuffle where the police were being heavy-handed. But we are up against a huge thing where my videos were used in court the other day, and it's awful, which I forgot I wanted to mention this. We had 4 truck surfers last year. So they took a convoy of 4 trucks, and they were pulled in at the front, and each mounted a truck, and they held the trucks for 100 hours. It was amazing. All the 3 of the firms pulled out from supplying the fracking industry as a result of this, 2 of whom didn't even realize they were supplying the fracking industry. But the sad thing was that the chaps who did this went into court, and we expected the usual, obstructing a highway, but they didn't. They got public nuisance. Now that's far worse. It involves custodial sentence. And so they went and they had a jury for this one. And unfortunately, all were found guilty of public nuisance. Sentencing will be on the 25th of this month, and they're looking at anything around 2 years, which is just insane.
That's just ridiculous, Tina.
It really is. That's what I mean, and that was the other bit to the part about the injunctions. It's the penalties we face now, to the point where we were able to grow as a movement, but now we'll be whittled down by fear, because people can't abandon dependent elderly relatives or their children or their jobs or what they do to pay their mortgage to go to prison or to pay huge costs. They can't do these things. So it's making it impossible for people to stand their ground and to say what needs to be said.
And it's obviously a big thing with them. They've decided that this is the way to go. Make it untenable for people. Let me just do a quick recap, Tina. Tina Louise Rothery is our guest. An absolutely amazing woman. Spoke a lot about her earlier on in the show. Anti-fracking campaigner. She's an environmentalist. She's a broadcaster as well, and she's stood for the Green Party. This is one of the most serious issues facing humanity. We were talking about another health problem yesterday on the programme. This is absolutely massive. I had a seismologist on this programme from Oklahoma 4 years ago who said there is no doubt that fracking not only does all the horrendous things to the land, to animals, to flora and fauna, to the air, as Tina says, but causes earthquakes, and you could be talking about catastrophe. There's no doubt about this. And these ladies and these people have been protesting, as Tina said, for years in Fylde, Blackpool, the northwest of this country, Lancashire. An amazing thing. Yeah, that's right. And not only that, but not only standing up to it, having success, as Tina has described there, keeping people back for hundreds of hours, but also convincing suppliers to these companies that it's not a good thing to do. They've also educated people. They are amazing people. We should aspire to be like them. And they've had all this success. And no, I mean that. I'm not blowing smoke. I'm not kissing your backside. And what these companies are doing now, aided by the authorities in this country, is they're trying to basically destroy this movement by making it illegal, by putting so much pressure on the heroic protesters and participants that they will just give it up. It's an absolute bloody outrage. Yeah, it's an outrage.
But then again, think of what we've achieved as well, though. In 7 years, and 7 years ago, it was only the Green Party stood with us, and the whole of the United Kingdom and Ireland was at risk. And then now, where we stand at this moment, is only the Conservative Party choose fracking. Everybody else is against. And only England, the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, have all stopped it, either with a moratorium or a pause or a ban. And it's only England and only the Conservatives. So we've chewed it down to a very much smaller problem. But this is where they're now getting backed into the corners. You know, KM8 got shut down over at Yorkshire because that was found out at the time that Carillion shared a director with Third Energy, who were drilling over there. So when Carillion went tits up, then the suppliers got scared, and it wasn't necessarily said that that was the reason that it closed down and they pulled out, but they did pull out. And it also showed the link between, you know, the underhanded practices of companies like Carillion and their tie-in with companies behind fracking in this country. And, you know, it's so obvious that much of this is fraudulent, and yet the government is choosing to put its fingers in its ears and close its eyes and go la la la.
So do you think, Tina, sorry to interrupt you again, do you think then, in the event that Labour enters government, or at least enters government in a coalition, maybe with the support of the Lib Dems, maybe with a few Greens, maybe, do you think if that happened, are you confident that it would end there and then?
I'm confident in one thing. I'm never confident in the politicians. I can't be confident in them at all, ever. I'm confident, though, in the panic of the investors. And I wait up till 1 o'clock in the morning to check the share price all the time, and we have beautifully devastating impacts on that share price that once upon a time for Quadrilla was $1.20 in Australia and is now down to 34 cents. So, you know, we've diminished them in their value. The only thing they're hanging on is this big payout. They've just realized that, you know, you think when the gas starts flowing that they're going to be in the money, but they're not, because once they frack, which will be any time now, they have to do a year's flow testing with that fracking. So yes, they'll be fracking and causing all the damage, but they're not able to be selling that on. So the shareholders, who are not very good at their own research, have just realized this, and that's not going to do well for them. They've also just realized that they've just been put back another month behind schedule. You know, this is 20 months at this one site to do a job that from bare field to gas production should take 5 months. And it's taken them 20 months because we're annoying up here. We keep getting in their way, at least we did. And so the shareholders realise too that the political situation in the UK is such that if the Conservatives win, they're fine. If the Conservatives don't win or don't have a clear majority, they are in deep trouble. Because certainly if Labour has any influence, it will say no to fracking. And if Labour gets in, it will be a ban on fracking. And even if it looks difficult to do, the investors just need to know there's no hope or there's a longer fight and they will pull out. You know, already they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. They've been hanging on for 7 years. You know, as nanas, we have aprons on, like tabards. And on the bottom of my tabard, I tick off every year that they're not fracking yet. And it's ticked for 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And here we are, you know, halfway through 18 and still nothing. And yet every year they've said we'll be in production next year.
And you must have cost them millions.
£17 million per year is what Quadrilla spends to be here, and they have yet to produce a penny, not 1 penny of gas. So yeah, we're doing okay. I mean, you don't want to sound sort of sharp about it, but it's good. But we're so close down. You know, they cleared the pad down of all the drilling stuff. Now the gas, the stuff for the fracking spread starts coming in. And so we had 2 of our first deliveries this morning. We go down most mornings about 7 o'clock. But as I say, it's been about 600 days, so it's been quite depleting on us. But we have surges, and we have like big groups come and stay with us. And we did a carnival for 48 hours and completely closed them down. And that was glorious. You know, that was in our heyday when we were impacted by this injunction. You know, there's so much that we can do. And every Monday we use it as a learning day. So we get academics and authors, and, you know, George Monbiot came up and various politicians. And they come and speak at the side of the road, because the thing about this fight is you don't fight it with just activists on top of trucks or just politicians speaking for you. You need everyone to find a role. And that's what this has done. And the bonus being, people are empowered. And all of a sudden, although it's sad for them at first, they have their eyes open to everything. So all of a sudden they realize that their politicians are not the professionals they hoped they'd be, that their councillors are ill-informed and overworked, that their media is telling them lies, and that their whole life, they can wonder now what was ever the truth. Because clearly we can see we've been misled, and we've been sleepwalking into this phony democracy where we're not represented and we can't be heard and we can't even keep our children safe. It's disgusting, and it's tantamount to criminal. It really is. I
often wonder, because I do think about you a lot, and the nanas and everybody else. No, I do, genuinely. And I often wonder, I think history will remember the movement, your movement, the movement you've been a part of. will remember it as a great movement. I really do believe that. I know you're not interested in any of that. You don't do it for any of that. It comes.
But I would like it to be remembered, because I'd like it to be something that goes on empowering individuals. Because what we don't want is what we currently have, which is some amazing activists that have to run all the way around the country being activists to save people. What we really need is people rising up as activists when the call comes in their town, when something is threatening their well-being. They should rise up and feel empowered to act, and then go back into life. Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't be. It should be a participatory system that we live in, where we can raise our voices and can be heard, and manage to make wisdom seep through to that place where only corruption and money get to listen to. You know, the lobbyists are there every day. We're there, once every 4 or 5 years? You know, where is the fairness in that? And why have we tolerated it for so long? And why didn't we all realize, you know?
I'm going to be watching with great interest next Wednesday, as everybody else will be. It'll be interesting to see how many politicians come out and say, yes, Tina, and yes, nanas, and yes, protesters, we're on your side, and how many won't. It'll be absolutely fascinating to watch. The reason I brought up that about thinking about you and the movement being recognised in the future historically is because movements like yours over the years have proved that you can do things. Why it doesn't set off, and maybe this will be different, maybe in the future it will be, why it doesn't set people off in other directions about other big problems. You understand what I'm saying? Why people don't see what you've achieved and say, wow, it can be done. And that
I hope
frustrates
that will come as a result of it, though, don't you?
So
you
do
kind
I.
of got to think, well, I see all around me, people often say, oh, God, it's been a really long journey. It must be hard and exhausting. I think, it is, but in the end, it's actually one of the most satisfying things you can do, because sitting and being angry with the television is not going to solve anything. It's going to build up my rage. Whereas getting up every day and doing something and being surrounded by people who are empowering and growing in number gives you nothing but positivity and optimism, and it's uplifting. And I know for them that, when we stop fracking, then we turn our attention to what the hell let it through in the first place. How dare they be willing to play Russian roulette with our children's lives? And let's get to the bottom of the real problem, because fracking is just a symptom of a very diseased society. The fact that it exists is proof of that there isn't logic, wisdom, and the well-being of the community first, that came very much later. And you see it happen that, here in Lancashire, they have, given us less and less money to our council every year, to the point where they're on bankruptcy. So they bankrupt you down, and they break your services, and they take away your libraries and your post offices. And they get to the point where all of a sudden there's a desperation. And at that point, you'll probably take any jobs, I think that's sinful,
Yeah.
The NHS, if we keep underfunding it, people will end up screaming for private, because the current system would have been worthless. And the same in education. I think they break it so that we despise it, and they can replace it with a privatized version, And with fracking, they just will continue to lie and cheat their way in by just railroading certain businesses and influential members of the community and paying for a scout hut and a flower festival. It's also transparent, and yet some so choose not to see.
I want to tell our listeners to, if you haven't followed Tina on Twitter already, you can find her. It's at Tina Louise UK. You can't miss that, at Tina Louise UK. But you can also read her. It's at tinalouiseuk.blogspot.com. .co.uk, tinalouiseuk.blogspot.co.uk. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, I mean it with every breath in my body. You and the activists up there, I say up there, a little further north of me, you're the best of us, Tina. You're the absolute best of us. And
I'm very kind of you always to share this stuff, but where would we be without the broadcast? We have to give our words wings, and it's only been because we finally can, through shows like yours and through social media and through independent sites, actually finally be heard. Otherwise, we'd be shouting to each other, and we'd never have had the reach. From your show alone, I have that many different followers that I wouldn't have otherwise got, And I just think it's part about optimism in the future, where you think, it's going to be all right. In the end, it'll be all right. We're here for damage limitation, and we really need to get our asses in gear and get some of that done, But once the damage limitation is done, I think the younger people who were not indoctrinated in the news at 10, where they had other choices on how they filled their minds with information. So I think that the future's going to be okay.
Brilliant to speak with
and
you
you're
again.
part of it and we're part of it.
Absolutely, Tina. Look, Godspeed to you and everybody else there, and I look forward to seeing you next
And
Wednesday.
anyone in London will see them next Wednesday, 10:30 till 4:30. You won't be able to miss us. We look like suffragettes. We have very high-necked, uncomfortable white shirts.
You'll be looking brilliant. I can't wait to see you. Speak soon, Tina. Bye for now. The quite amazing Tina Louise Rothery live on the line to us there today. I think from Filed, where she's been protesting and educating people as they've done every day for hundreds and hundreds of days. Extraordinary and incredibly modest as well. And it's true, they haven't begun and haven't started fracking there, and it is down to the efforts of those people. It's a remarkable thing. It really is. It's 14 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. I'm going to take a very quick break. When I come back, I'll read some more of your tweets. It is Thursday's Richie Allen Show, and it's been a quick old week and it's been a quick old show. Back in 2 minutes.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structure and application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman, Tina. Dean Smith tweets, how you doing, Dean? By the way, fracking is small fry, Richie, to the other ways that they are killing us. How can a human focus on any one of the specific attacks that are upon us? Chemtrails, vaccines, water, food and air. But love to Tina. We need more like her. I'll tell you what, Dean. If fracking was to commence on a large scale in this country, it would not be small fry. I've looked into it and I've read a lot about it. And in the very early days of this program, I spoke to a lot of people, particularly American guests from academic, from universities in America. It wouldn't be small fry. It would be catastrophic in terms of the damage it would do rurally. It would basically make hundreds and thousands of acres of rural land uninhabitable. And there are conspiracy researchers who have written and spoken for many years, not just one, but many, who've talked about fracking being part of an agenda to drive people, humanity, out of rural areas, away from coastal areas and into planned super cities. And I also have a lot of sympathy with that theory. So it isn't small fry, and we've seen in America where it's taken place, the damage it's done over there. But I hear where you're coming from. But if it was to begin here, it wouldn't be small fry. Hi to William Henderson. How you doing, William? Very interested there in what Tina had to say. Hi to JP in Manchester, to Faisal, to Liz Jones. Gojira says, thanks to Richie's accent. When he says protester, it sounds to me like he says process tester, which is more accurate. No harm to Tina. Tina even, she's awesome. That was ironic right there. Hi to Spirit Samba as well, to everybody tweeting today. Hi to Patrick. Now Patrick is tweeting about one of the biggest stories of the week, the government, the UK government, coming out and saying it has identified 2 Russian men that it blames for the Novichok attack on the Skripals, which didn't kill the Skripals, but did kill allegedly a woman called Dawn Sturgis. So there you go. Let's see. So what does Patrick say? He tweets to me, what concerns me, Richie, most about the myriad of lies pervading Wiltshire and the Skripal story related events is that there appears to be virtually 0 MPs of any colour that disagree with the BS that is being presented by the UK government, MI6 and the police. Is there no hope for truth in the UK? Well, programmes like this will always endeavour to present the other side of it. The problem with programmes like this is we don't have the reach of the national media, sadly. Although without being arrogant, I guess, I had this argument with, there's a guy called Ian Dale who presents for LBC. He's a Conservative Party man. Well, he was for many years, and he stood for the Tories twice and lost. He's a radio presenter now. This is the state of radio in the 21st century. You know, they've basically got politicians, ex-politicians, former party men and women basically presenting talk programmes these days. Now, Ian Dale is a world-class muppet, and I had a running battle with him on Twitter a couple of years ago, and I embarrassed him because he was mocking the reach of this programme, and he told a few porky pies about having 500,000 listeners a day on his own programme, which was absolute bullshit. Of course he didn't. And I know all about Rajar and how listener figures are collated and how they come to understand how many listeners programmes have. And I looked at my iTunes listeners, and I looked at my YouTube listenership at that time before my programme was deleted. I looked at the podcast numbers, and I looked at the metadata of the live audience, live on the Richie Allen Show on the stream. And I got back to Ian Dale and I said, you know what, pal? My listeners might be diverse, they might be all over the world, but I've got more listeners than you. What does that say about you? But anyway, it's becoming more and more difficult with shadow banning and everything else for programmes like this to reach more and more people. So what are you saying, Richie? What I'm saying is now, if somebody else came along tomorrow and decided, I like what the Richie Allen Show does. I like what Michael Rivero does. I'm really interested in Tony Gosling and the Politics Show. I like those shows. I'm going to do it now. And I'm going to interview the men and women who don't get a look in on the mainstream media. If you were to start tomorrow, and I'm not disencouraging you, by the way, if you want to do it, do it. Absolutely do it. Make a programme. Make it better than this programme. Do it. Make a programme. Put people on it and you talk. You absolutely do it. What I'm saying is, if you start tomorrow, you're starting from a more difficult position than I started a few years ago when I started doing this. Now if you start and you start putting people on, challenging the narrative, you'll be shadow banned out of existence. Be very difficult for you to get a foothold. This programme has an established audience, but they've made it very difficult for it to grow beyond that, and that's where we are. Dean tweets, beautiful human being is Tina. Admiration is not enough, he says there. Faisal says the thing is that fracking never depended on the sales revenues. Someone makes money from the financing of it, even if they never sell any gas at all. That's a brilliant point, that. And Tina alluded to that when she talked about looking at the market movements late at night. I think she said 1 o'clock in the morning, watching the markets, speculating on it, and derivative trading and all that nonsense. That's where money is made. It's a very good point as well there. It is 6 minutes to the top of the hour. Hi to John Kerr. How you doing, John? Hi to Andy Newman as well. To Sean McDonald. I might have mentioned Sean earlier on. Well, there you go, dear. And another 40 tweets have come in. Dean, I know you didn't mean it that way, mate. I know that. I'm just making the point that Dean says he didn't mean it that way. They have just won a contract 6 miles away from me. I joined the protest. I know you didn't mean it that way. It isn't happening now in the UK, so we're not seeing the effects of it. If it does, is the point I'm making. But listen, I hear you loud and clear. A lot of tweets came in there that I don't really have time to read now. Right, that's pretty much it for Thursday's programme. Thanks for listening to it. Thanks for putting up with the change of direction in terms of broadcasting at 5. It's making a big difference to me. I can't tell you how much it really is. You see, nothing was lost. The programme will continue to broadcast for 2 hours. It'll never be less than that, okay, on a regular basis, except for Sunday View on Sunday mornings. But it's given me a new lease of life in terms of spending time with the woman I love and my tiny family. It's hugely important that. So I've had a good week. I've enjoyed it more than I've enjoyed programmes this year, to be honest. It's been great to come back. Thanks for putting up with me. I will be joining you at 11 a.m. UK time, live on Sunday morning, for the regular Sunday morning look through the Sunday newspapers here in the UK. That's a programme I love doing, I really do. So join me on Sunday at 11, where we'll check out the front pages of the national tabloids, the broadsheets as well, and we'll have a look at what's making the big stories. We'll check the political shows as well, the Mar show, the Sky News shows, and we'll bring you the best of those shows as well. Okay, do check out the programming on fabradiointernational.com. It is an amazing, amazing project, an amazing platform. Do check out triggerwarning.tv and the Trigger Warning show with Graham and with Hayden. All of that stuff there. To get all of this stuff, download the Cogent Radio app. It's a ethical app because there's no cookies involved. I said this yesterday, I said it probably Tuesday. It doesn't give you anything. It's not bombarding you with advertising, and it isn't storing your data. It doesn't want anything from you. And it's free, the Cogent Radio app, if you're using a cell phone regularly and you want to get radio on the go. Check out the Cogent Radio app. Have a great weekend. Thanks to all my guests this week. Huge shout out to Tina Louise Rothery. All the love in the world to Tina. And thanks to Tony Gosling. Thisweek.org.uk to find out all about the politics show on BCfm, which airs on Fridays. That was a bloody mouthful. I'm dedicating this song to Tina Louise Rothery, the Nanas, and all the amazing activists in the Northwest that have so far prevented fracking taking place here. What an amazing woman. Have a great weekend. Speak soon. Bye now.